We've been discussing over the last few weeks the fact that it seems like even though Democrats are getting some wins, especially like lately, and if they framed it properly, could have a good midterm platform, they don't seem to be doing it very effectively. And how the Republicans, I did a whole segment about how Republicans are so much better at branding than the Democrats, where I think the core of the message of being on the left or being a progressive is really good. But we, for one, get really distracted with all of these kind of orbiting issues that we give a lot of time to, or we don't make it clear when there's things we did that are good, or I should say when the Democrats do things that are good and how that affects people's lives and why they should be supported. It just doesn't seem like they make as good of a case for themselves as the Republicans do. And it's weird because the Republicans often don't actually do that much material good for people, but then they make it out to be a situation where they did. And Trump's a great example of somebody who every time he talked, it was, I've done the best on this and I'm the most historically amazing on this. And even if you didn't support him, you were like, oh gosh, I gotta go fact check that. Did he really do that amazing thing that he said? Oh, nope, that wasn't true. But I think you do have to, if you want to do well in the midterms, as the Democrats, do a much better job of branding yourself. And it's going to be a little bit easier now that the economy is kind of back headed in the right direction. Obviously still a lot of economic pain out there, a lot of issues, but we seem to be heading in the correct direction. We saw the year over year inflation numbers coming out of July. It looked really good as far as slowing down inflation, even though it is still super high, as well as jobs numbers, as well as gas prices dropping. So you have that. And then the Democrats just passed through the Senate and is likely to get signed into law by Joe Biden pretty soon once it passes the House, a really good piece of legislation called the Inflation Reduction Act that I think will do very much good for Americans. So with all that in mind, you have a good amount of things there that you could really advocate on behalf of. And there's many other things that I'll show you in this video, but I've been screaming that like, oh, it's so aggravating because when Republicans are in power, everything's the greatest. Everything they've done is absolutely amazing. It's insane. And you could never find a better party in power. And the Democrats get in power and you just never really hear a peep out of them for the good things they're doing comparatively. Obviously they try to, but it doesn't seem to pierce the noise as effectively. But I saw an ad recently from the DNC that does a pretty good job of making the case for Democrats for the midterms, making the case for Joe Biden and why him as the leader of the Democrats is a good thing. I obviously have the stance that he shouldn't run in 2024, but the more popular he is right now, the more popular the Democrats will be largely. And so you've seen a situation where because he's so unpopular right now, Democrats are kind of distancing themselves from him in the midterms, which is not the best thing ever for a party. But I saw this ad and I wanted to show it to you because I think it's a good example of the type of noise the Democrats should be making more often. And Joe Biden, if he was a better communicator, would be telling this story over and over. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Look at these Democrats, a 50-50 split Senate. And you look at Joe Biden, suddenly you have this huge climate change plan, this huge plan to lower drug costs, to help Medicare recipients. Well, the head of the Republican Senate's talking about increasing costs for Medicare and Social Security and taxing poor and middle-class Americans. You've got an economic rescue plan that's led to the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. You've got a massive bipartisan infrastructure plan that was passed. You've got the first significant gun safety legislation passed in over a decade. You've got the China competitiveness bill, confirmation of the first black woman to the U.S. Supreme Court, and then this package, which is landmark. Yeah. This has been an extraordinarily successful 2 years. Any way you cut it, even Republicans have to admit this privately, and they are. It's been a hell of a run.
So obviously it's a campaign ad. That's why it's very pro-Democrats from the DNC. And it took an audio bit from a cable news show. And it's true, a lot of the stuff they're saying, and I've said this before, most people I talk to on the ground and people in my own life, even if they tend to be more liberal, think that the Democrats are failing miserably and think that Joe Biden's failing miserably. When I ask them, it's all kind of vibe things. But then when I walk through historically, especially in modern history, the amount that presidents are able to get done, the amount that parties are able to get done, especially with only 50-50 split in the Senate, and you compare that to what has been done under this administration, it's actually not bad. Again, compared to what I want, it is. Compared to what I think this moment calls for, it is. All of those things are absolutely present. I'm talking about from a campaigning perspective, okay? Nobody freak out. But you look at a situation where Biden gets in office, passes the American Rescue Plan that did massive stuff within that moment that was absolutely necessary. And then you have a bipartisan, and how divided we are right now, infrastructure bill that's a larger investment in infrastructure than I think ever was the statistic. So historically massive infrastructure bill on a bipartisan margin. And that's incredible anytime, but definitely in how divided we are now. And then you look at, fast forward, the Inflation Reduction Act, another massive piece of legislation that is absolutely significant and popular. And that's pretty good for how split we are right now in a 50-50 Senate and how hard it is to get things done. And then you look at economic factors that are now going in the right direction, and you have a case to be made for the Democratic Party in the midterms, why they should stay in power. And then separate from kind of the things the Democratic Party has done, the stuff that people are motivated about, including abortion, are huge stimulators for people to show up to the polls. So I think with this message getting put out, in addition to the other factors we've been talking about over the last few months, I think the Democrats have a really good chance in keeping the House and Senate in the midterms. Now, it's not absolute at all. Still a good chance Republicans could take one or both of those chambers. More likely to take one of them, but I think it's more likely than ever that the Democrats keep both chambers, which is very, very historically unlikely. Usually the president gets in power, who's one party, and the midterms reject the party that the president is. And then you add on top of that the fact that it is kind of the economy stupid, and people are upset about inflation and gas prices and stuff like that. So if we see things keep going in this direction economically, I think you're getting better and better as we approach the midterms as far as chances for the Democrats. But if things don't go fast enough in the correct direction or somehow start going in the wrong direction, then I do think Republicans have a better chance. And that is the message. That's the story that they're telling on the Republican side, is all of these economic factors that you're upset with, it's the Democratic Party's fault, which, as I've explained in previous segments, I'm totally fine blaming the Democratic Party for things. Honestly, I have no stake in the party infrastructure of either. It's more so about what they're doing and the honest truth of the situation. And in this situation, we saw a massive pandemic, huge economic crash, getting out of that, bunch of money being dumped in the economy under Trump and Biden, and also price gouging and all of these other things, supply chain issues. Yes, you're going to see bad economic effects from that, but it's hard for people to hear that message as loudly as the message of, look, they're in power and you're upset about economic conditions, so kick them out. That's a pretty, logical response, even though if you looked in the nitty gritty of the details, you would probably understand it's not Joe Biden's fault for high gas prices or inflation. But as economic conditions go in the right direction and the Democratic Party tells this story, I think they have a better and better chance. And they should be better at touting their own successes if they want to have any chance.